Good morning and welcome to the meeting, the 9th meeting that is, of the Economy, Energy and Fair Work Committee for 2021. Apologies have been received from Andy Whiteman, and the first item on the agenda is a decision by the committee to take items 3, 4 and 5 in private. Are we all agreed? We are all agreed. We come now then to item 2 on the agenda, which is our look at the impact of COVID-19 on Scotland's businesses, workers and the economy. Now, we have with us today the Minister for Business, Fair Work and Skills, Jamie Hepburn. Welcome to you, Minister. And also with him are Gavin Gray, who's Deputy Director for the Young Persons Guarantee, Stephen Garland, Head of the Fair Work Unit, and Gail Mackey, who is the Head of the Labour Market Analysis Unit. So I'll invite the Minister, first of all, to make a brief opening statement before we come to questions from committee members. Minister.
Thank you, Convener. Convener, the pandemic has created unprecedented challenges for young people in how they go about their daily lives. Through no fault of their own, they've been amongst the hardest hit by the economic harms resulting from the virus. The impact of the pandemic is also exacerbating the inequalities that have existed across the labour market for some time. Those on low incomes and insecure contracts, which have been, of course, more prevalent amongst young people, have been the worst affected. Sectors such as hospitality and non-essential retail, which employ large numbers of young people, have been heavily affected by COVID-19 restrictions. If these sectors are not able to take on new workers, or if more businesses have to make people redundant once the furlough period ends, we will need to work with a wider range of employers in other sectors to create job opportunities. We are working to do this through our national mission to create jobs and, of course, through our Young Persons Guarantee. Facing these unprecedented challenges, we must all work together to help this generation make the transition into work and ensure that youth unemployment will not be a legacy of this pandemic. When I appeared before you in October last year, Convener, I said that we are in a different position now than we were after the last recession. We have strong foundations in place to support young people, such as developing the Young Workforce Programme, strong partnerships with local government, a well-established skills agency in Skills Development Scotland, locally responsive and person-centred employability programmes delivered through No One Left Behind, and world-class universities and colleges. We have created opportunities, and a primary focus of the Young Persons Guarantee is ensuring that young people know what support is available to them and how they can access it. Through the Guarantee, we have intentionally adopted a no wrong door approach where delivery partners work collectively to ensure all young people requiring support are able to access it through existing points of contact that we'll already be familiar with, such as Skills Development Scotland, careers advisors, developing young workforce school, coordinators, local authority, employability support officers, colleges and specialist service providers in the third sector. The Young Persons Guarantee website also provides details on the range of opportunities on offer and additional points of contact for young people. Our discussions today around the impact of COVID-19 on young people are vital as we work collectively to ensure the prospects of young people are not permanently damaged. And Convener, I know that is an ambition that all of us share. I'll be happy to take your questions, Convener.
Thank you very much, Minister. First of all, the coronavirus job retention scheme extension has been announced by the UK Government to September 2021. So this is part of the fairly generous support that we've seen from the UK Government during the coronavirus situation. Now, I know that that extension was announced since the Scottish budget was proposed. I'm just wondering how the Minister sees that affecting the Scottish Government's expectations for unemployment as we move forward in this year.
Well, Convener, first of all, I should say it is welcome, of course, that the coronavirus job retention scheme has been extended. It would be churlish not to welcome that. I would observe that it would have been better still if there had been greater lead-in period and greater certainty for employers earlier on, but nonetheless, it is of course welcome. In terms of the likely impact, we still anticipate that there will be an uplift in unemployment when that scheme ends. So effectively, what it is doing is probably shifting our anticipated peak of unemployment from around Q2 this year into Q4 when the scheme comes to an end. And largely that reflects our experience thus far. Whenever the furlough scheme has been announced as being extended, it has kind of pushed back our expectation. In terms of forecasts for what unemployment might look like, there are, of course, different measurements or different forms of analysis, but we know that the OBR, for instance, has forecast an expectation of unemployment of around 6.5% in Q4 of this year. I would observe, of course, Convener, that over the last period, our unemployment levels have remained relatively stable, and that, of course, has been welcome. That has largely been because we have had the furlough scheme in place, but already we have seen that is not spreading itself evenly, and there has been an uplift in unemployment for young people already. So we know that where these figures, as concerning as they are in terms of that 6.5% figure going up from around 4% just now, we know that that could be deeper still for cohorts of the population, young people in particular. So we also have to bear that in mind, that unemployment will not spread itself evenly.
Thank you, Minister. I mean, I suppose from either government's point of view, I mean, the situation, the COVID situation, didn't result from either government's handling of matters, and the question is how best to come out of it, and perhaps there's no perfect answer. But would you agree that trying to extend support will allow for more time for businesses and the economy to recover, and hopefully lessen the amount of unemployment that you foresee happening when support comes to an end?
In terms of furlough, Convener, yes, I suppose I would recognise it gives more certainty to businesses. I think the more significant extension period that we've seen announced by the Chancellor than we might have otherwise seen, as we saw when previous extensions were announced, is welcome. I'm trying not to be churlish about it because it has been extended. That is welcomed, but we know other jurisdictions made an announcement much earlier for a significant period of time. It would have been preferable if the UK government had done that early on, as we saw in France and Germany with their equivalents, because that would have given more certainty for businesses. But nonetheless, yes, of course, it allows businesses to plan ahead and know that there is that form of support there available to them to try and retain as much of their workforce as possible. I'm conscious, though, of course, Convener, that is only part of the equation. We must try and support businesses in the round. Whilst it is welcome there is that support there for their employees, what we need to do, of course, is continue to try leveraging business support to help sustain businesses through what continues to be a difficult period. And of course, that's something we've done over the last year and something we will continue to do as we work our way through COVID-19.
All right, come now to questions from Gordon MacDonald. Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, Minister. You touched on your opening remarks that unemployment's not spread evenly against different cohorts of the population, and that young people have been hit because they're particularly employed in hospitality and retail, and those sectors have been hit hard by the pandemic. The recent House of Commons Library report published in February on youth unemployment highlights that youth unemployment across the UK has increased by 13% and now stands at 14.2% for young people under 24. Are you able to give the numbers for Scotland? And can you tell us what the Scottish Government is doing to mitigate the scarring effects of unemployment on young people?
Yes, I can give you those figures, Mr MacDonald. So the latest figures, certainly I have before me, is that the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds in Scotland is 11.1%. So we are still doing slightly better than the UK overall, but nonetheless, it is still about 2% up over the year. So when I said to the convener that we were already, despite the fact that the labour market is broadly remaining stable at the macro level, we are already starting to see that difference in terms of younger people. And that's why we've sought to respond. So that is why we have created the Young Persons Guarantee, leveraging in that significant resource to try and make sure that we're doing everything we can to support young people through what is a very difficult period of time. So you'll be aware that we announced £125 million of specific funding for skills and training and employability initiatives in response to COVID-19, and some £60 million of that has been leveraged specifically into the Young Persons Guarantee. I should make clear, of course, Young Persons Guarantee is effectively encapsulating a lot of pre-existing activity. So that £60 million is an enhancement. It comes on top of the existing support that we leverage into Skills Development Scotland, into the Helping Young Workforce programme, into our tertiary education system, and so on. But that support specifically has created around 18,000 new opportunities for young people this year through a range of provision, through local authorities working with us as partners, through college sector trying to support more young people into apprenticeships, and also some interaction with the third sector, Inspiring Scotland, Prince's Trust, Barnardo's, and Action for Children, all of whom are excellent at supporting particularly vulnerable young people, because again, just as I've made the point that for young people overall, there's an uplift in unemployment. We know even within that will not spread itself evenly. It will be those young people who are in cohorts of the population who are already furthest from the labour market who will be impacted more severely further still. So again, we must bear that in mind through our approach to supporting young people as we work our way through this difficult period.
I mean, it's good news that we are supporting young people to either go into training, apprenticeship, or get employment where it's available. But the other issue that we have to contend with is underemployment. And that underemployment may take many forms. It might be people want more hours in their current job, they might want a replacement job with longer hours, or they might want an additional job. Has any analysis been done into the labour market for young people about the number of people that are currently being underemployed, and is there anything the government can do to support people to move on to get those additional hours that they want?
So as you mentioned, Mr MacDonald, there are effectively two ways in which you can talk about underemployment. There's the established technical analysis of hours of employment, and we do have information around that. There's a well-established process for measuring that through the ONS annual population survey, and the estimate for Scotland in terms of hours-based underemployment was 7.8% for the period 2019 to 2020. So we have that hard and fast statistical information. I think that's across all ages, so I'd need to take it away and see if we have anything more specifically for young people. So I commit to doing that. What I would say again, that for young people, in terms of the fundamental issue that you've spoken about, trying to make sure that they can get more hours or another form of employment that will give them those hours, that's a core part of our guarantee, working with employers to try and make sure that not only are young people getting into work, as important as that is, but their experience of work, the quality of work, and the fact that work will sustain them, both in terms of the remuneration, but the core hours it provides, that will be part of our consideration too. There is the other measurement, of course, as well, which you have alluded to and touched upon, which is where by a person may be overqualified, for want of a better term. And I use that carefully because I recognise any job that a person has to do in any part of the labour market requires a skill set. But in terms of the sense of a person as degree level qualification and then maybe undertaking some form of employment that doesn't require that, as an example, we know that's a facet of our labour market too. Trying to get that information isn't quite as straightforward as it is through the measurement around hours. So what we're doing right now is we are working through the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services and Skills Development Scotland and Young Scot, trying to get a sense through engaging with university graduates and college leavers as to what their experience is in terms of matching up the qualification they have with the type of work they're doing. So again, we recognise it's important to have a better understanding around that, and there is work underway in that regard.
Okay, thanks very much, Convener.
Thank you. Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Minister. Minister, can you give an update on how many apprenticeships have been supported through the Apprenticeship Employer Grant and the Adopt an Apprentice scheme? And how does that compare with the reduction in the number of modern apprenticeships starts due to COVID-19?
Well, in terms of the information we have just now, it's probably a little early to report the specifics around the Apprenticeship Employer Grant. We will have greater clarity on that as we come to the end of the year. A lot of that is still being processed right now. So there are applications that have been made and they are being signed off, checked and signed off by Skills Development Scotland just now. So I'm loath to give a specific figure here, even though we're close to the year end, because we don't know precisely. Once that's available, of course, that should be reported around the same time as our overall apprenticeship statistics, which is usually about June, to show what the experience in terms of the numbers of apprentices overall has been for any given year. Then we'll have greater clarity. In terms of Adopt an Apprentice, we do have a bit more information on that. Again, though, a caution, it is only at the end of the third quarter, so around 148 applications have been approved, which is not inconsistent with the figures we've seen over the last 3 years. So last year, for example, 2019-20, by the end of the year, there were 227 applications approved, 262 the year before, 201 the year before. So you can see the numbers fluctuate, but they don't fluctuate greatly. I think there's a possibility actually the numbers could be lower this year. And that takes me back to the convener's opening question, because apprentices are, of course, employees. So many of them will have been furloughed as well. So we actually might see that the numbers of those supported through Adopt an Apprentice this year. This is speculative on my part, I should say, at this stage, Mr. Lyle, because, as I say, we'll only know the figures come the end of the year. But we may see the numbers lower this year as a direct result of furlough. Then going back to the point I made, and again in response to the convener, we could see an uplift come quarter four of this year, in which case it is possible we might see an uplift in terms of the numbers supported through Adopt an Apprentice, either this coming financial year or perhaps into the financial year following. So in terms of the numbers, which is of course the fundamental question asking Mr. Lyle, they should be available soon.
Yeah, the problem is that with COVID, a lot of firms are in flux. So I would expect the figures to be in flux also. Right, the latest data shows the impact of the pandemic on modern apprenticeships. So can you give an update on the impact on foundation and graduate apprenticeships? Have you any information you can share with the committee in regard to that?
It largely falls in the same sphere in that we report these come the end of the year, so they'll be reported alongside the other apprenticeship figures in June 2021. What I can say is that certainly the dialogue we've had with Skills Development Scotland, it shows that, or tells us that these numbers have held up pretty well. That's not come without challenge, of course. Foundation apprenticeships are, of course, part of the senior school phase offering. We've done an awful lot of good work over the past number of years to embed them as a core part of that offering, and that is still my ambition. There has, of course, been some disruption, which is inevitable given the necessity to close schools and young people can't get into the school environment. But through being responsive and adaptive, shifting stuff onto online learning and supporting the remote delivery of work placements, we've done pretty well, is my understanding, in terms of holding up foundation apprenticeships. And similarly with graduate apprenticeships, they seem to have held up better than modern apprenticeships. We count those collectively, so they'll both be in the same measurement. What I can say is an overall level. You'll just bear with me for a second, Mr. Lyle. I can tell you what because it was remiss of me, you did actually ask this in the last question. I should have said that we know that the number of apprenticeship starts overall this year have been down. They were, when we got to quarter three, I beg your pardon, of this year, there have been 10,604 starts, which is a decline of around half by the equivalent period in the last year. And that goes back to the point you've made in terms of employers being in flux. Understandably, to some extent, there's been a reluctance from many employers in terms of recruiting apprentices. The good news is that that's improved over the year. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that the fact that we're down 50% come quarter three is good news, but at the end of quarter one we were down around 80% at the equivalent period. So you can see as the years moved on, it has got better, but nonetheless it is a significant source of disappointment to me that we will not hit the target we'd set ourselves of 30,000 starts by the end of this year, which I have no doubt if COVID-19 had not prevailed upon us, we absolutely would have done, because we've hit our target year on year over the past number of years. The task now, of course, is to make sure as we come into the next period that we maximise the number of employers offering those opportunities.
Yeah, COVID-19's had a tremendous effect on every business right across the board. Now, I wouldn't expect otherwise. And as I agree with you, Minister, if we're ready for as soon as COVID is over and we can bounce back, that would be good. Convener, that's me.
Thank you. And now we come to questions from the Deputy Convener, Willie Coffey.
Thanks very much, Convener. Good morning, Minister. My questions are kind of in the same area there that Dick Lyle was talking about, both in terms of graduates and the 30,000 target that you mentioned. You'll be aware that employment opportunities for young graduates coming out of uni and college has featured quite heavily in the committee's work, and we recognise that there's a huge job of work to be done here to try to turn this round, to help these young people directly into work or through the apprenticeship route. Could you say a wee bit more about what the government's thinking is here to try to bring unis, colleges, the graduates and the employers together a bit more? What kind of assistance do you think we need to try to bring to the table here to try to turn this round a wee bit?
Well, a lot of that falls into the sphere of our young person's guarantee approach more generally. Through that approach, and Sandy Begbie, who you'll all be aware is the Chief Executive of SFE, Scotland's financial enterprise, the representative body for the financial services sector in Scotland, he was tasked by Fiona Hislop to pulled together a proposition for the Young Persons Guarantee. He's done a terrific job, incidentally, and he continues to take forward that activity, and he is now making sure that we are engaging with a raft of employers across different sectors to commit to engaging with the programme and to offer those opportunities to young people. And graduates, as you have cited and mentioned, are a cohort of that population that we need to provide some attention to. Clearly, and you would expect, I certainly hope the committee would expect, that we have to place a lot of concerted effort on supporting those young people who are furthest removed from the labour market, and we will do that. We're thinking through a range of things, such as an employer recruitment incentive account to the apprenticeship employer grant to do that. But graduates as well have to form part of our approach, and I recall that the committee in its report asked questions around the ScotGrad scheme, so there is some specific activity underway to learn the lessons from that scheme but create a replacement scheme. There's very close engagement between University of Scotland, Scottish Enterprise and Skills Development Scotland to try and make sure that we are delivering effectively a successor scheme as part of the Young Persons Guarantee. And what I'm very clear is that given where we are, the scale and reach of that programme is larger than the one that was in place before. I can say that in the 6 years that ScotGrad operated, it supported around 1,400 graduates, which by my estimation is quite a significant cohort. My ambition, and we're working this through with the organisations that I've spoken about, is that the scheme we have in place next year will support about 500, so you can see that's moving up a notch again. And if demand is higher, then we'll consider that again. So that's a very specific intervention about matching up graduates with employers. Of course, there are many more graduates than that number, and the task is to try and make sure that we have an environment where employers are recruiting, they're looking for young people with a skill set, and that can be one that's acquired through a different range of measures, be it go through university, go through college, or an apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are employers, though, Minister, asking for specifically? Do they need help to take on more university college graduates in this crucial year, this COVID year, where it's affected so many of our young people? Are they simply asking for help to hire, in a sense? Is that what they need? And both governments have got a role to play here, of course. It's not just the Scottish Government. So I'm always curious to know, what are the employers saying to you that they need?
Well, it's mixed. I mean, the fundamental thing that they have told us, and this incidentally isn't just in the context of COVID-19, it's been a long-standing request, is that we make sure that the output of our skills system delivers a raft of people, young, perhaps not so young. That might take us into the territory of the Future Skills Action Plan that we published a couple of years ago, and the need to upskill the existing and reskill the existing workforce, but make sure that we have a population that has the requisite skill set that matches our societal and economic needs, which fundamentally comes down to employer needs. So that's the main request. In the current context, it'll be mixed. Many employers will get on with the job. They have vacancies and they will advertise them and they will recruit accordingly. Where there may be a cohort that we need to incentivise, then we'll do that through, as I've just mentioned, a successor to the ScotGrad scheme in the case of graduates, and in the case of those who might be those young people who might be further removed from the labour market, through the type of employer recruitment incentive that we're thinking through right now. So it's important for us that we deliver a range of mechanisms that support employers, a wide range of employers to engage with and support young people. And of course, a developing young workforce initiative has a role to play in that regard as well. But also our reach is across all young people. We're supporting them all to get ahead in life. And as you're right to observe, of course, that there is a role for others in this, not just governments, I should say, but there is a role for the UK government. They've created the Kickstart scheme. Okay, again, I'm not going to be churlish about it. I would just quietly observe it would have been better if there had been a degree of co-design and that interacting probably better from the outset with the system we have here in Scotland. But nonetheless, it's in place, and our approach is to try and see that as part of our young person's guarantee as much as the range of other initiatives that exist. Going back to the point that I made, that young person's guarantee isn't a standalone programme in of itself. It's about trying to maximise everything that we have in the system. So hopefully that's a full enough response for you, Mr. Cockney.
That's great, Jamie. Just finally from me on the 30,000 apprentices that you mentioned, just in response to Dick Lyle there, that clearly we're not going to hit that because of the COVID situation. Could you just say a wee sentence or two about how we're trying to cope with that? Are we bringing in any short or medium term targets to try to assist as best we can there?
We're probably going to be quite cautious for this coming year because the challenge we have, and this goes back to the dialogue we've had around the economy and the labour market likely to be in a wee bit of flux in the coming year. And if we have learned anything from the last year, with that being the case, we're clearly not going to hit our target for this year, which, as I say, is a source of regret. I came out as early as I possibly could to front that up and not to pretend we would. So I answered a government-inspired question just before Christmas in December to say we weren't going to hit that target. What we do in the coming year is and it goes back to my last answer, we engage as widely as we possibly can to maximise the uptake of apprenticeships. That's my intention, that's what we will do. What we then will consider going forward when the labour market's in a more secure place is a matter of some consideration so that we can have a target that's meaningful, that's realistic, that's responsive to where the economy is. What I will say is that in the past number of years we've been very successful at meeting the targets that we'd set ourselves. I've had responsibility for the government's policy for apprenticeships since I was appointed as the Minister for Employability and Training before taking on this role, and I was appointed back in May 2016. And year on year, we've hit the target we set ourselves for apprenticeship starts. So we can do it. That's the credit there is down to employers, to the people taking apprenticeships themselves, our training providers, Skills Development Scotland, the totality of our system. That's a system that has shown it can deliver, and I know it will deliver again in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, many thanks for that, Minister. Back to you, Convener.
Thank you, Minister. I wouldn't want to be churlish either. I'm just wondering if you've got papers rustling about in your microphone, because it's sort of, we can hear quite loudly. So I've been told myself not to do that. So you and me both.
Well, I'll do my best, Convener. I try and remember as much of this off the top of my head as I can. I'm also reliably informed that my microphone and my laptop is not that great, so I've actually got one attached here. I'll try and do better. I make no promises. I'll just talk louder.
We can hear you and make you out. It's just there's this snowstorm going on as well. So if we can, we'll all try to do our best. Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Convener. Minister, £125 million was announced in the 2021-2022 budget for the Young Persons Guarantee Scheme and wider employability support. I just wonder if the Minister can provide an update on how this funding is being allocated and whether the Minister thinks that this amount is sufficient to achieve the aims of the Young Persons Guarantee.
Okay, I was more tentative turning the pages there, so I hope that helped. Yes, I can lay that out for you, Mr. Golden. As I said earlier, some £60 million was identified this financial year for the Young Persons Guarantee. In the coming year, our intention is to have an uplift in that to £70 million, and hopefully I've laid out in some detail the type of activity that we want to see taken forward as part of the Young Persons Guarantee, related to developing the young workforce, related to trying to have some new provision in college, some short, sharp provision of training in our college sector. And there is also the commitment to continue to invest in the National Transition Training Fund, which we also committed to doing in the last year, which is effectively our commitment. The Young Persons Guarantee, by its very name, of course, is a commitment to young people aged 24 and 16 to 24. The National Transition Training Fund is our equivalent commitment to those aged 25 and above, those who have fallen out of the labour market or who are in danger of falling out of the labour market. How do we support them to acquire a new skill set so that they can get back into or progress in employment as quickly as possible? We're continuing to work through how that might work in practice. It has to be responsive. It has to meet that challenge that I laid out earlier in terms of being responsive to social, economic and employer need. And there is also a commitment to providing additional resource to our No One Left Behind agenda, which is the partnership between the partnership primarily between the Scottish Government and local government as the commissioners of employability services, but a wider partnership working with the third sector, with training providers and employers to make sure that we're meeting everyone's requirements. So that's the additional resource. It comes on top, of course, of the investment we're already making. So it is additional on top of the significant resource that we already have committed and we already deploy in these areas.
Thank you, Minister. Could you provide an update on how alignment between the Young Persons Guarantee and the skills and the Climate Skills Action Plan has been tracked?
Yes, actually, there's well, this goes back to the very heart of the point I was making about trying to meet our societal and economic imperatives. One of the societal imperatives we know is being responsive to climate change, to make sure that we're doing better in that regard, to make sure that we meet our commitments around a net zero economy that we have to transition towards. Now, that's a transition that will take place over many years, but we know we're going to get there. We have to act now. That's why we published the Climate Change Emergency Skills Action Plan just towards the end of last year. We've made specific commitments in there as part of that wider challenge of being responsive to the needs that we have in our economy, our labour market, to have the requisite skill set in our population to achieve our climate change ambitions. So we've committed to establishing the Green Jobs Workforce Academy, which we will take forward later this year. We are also committed to establishing the Green Jobs and Skills Hub to better identify what types of jobs that will be needed so that Workforce Academy can actually deliver what is required. And the Young Person's Guarantee and indeed our National Transition Training Fund have to be absolutely matched to that. We have to make sure that the output of those initiatives, and indeed our skills system more widely, is better matched to what the needs of employers will be, the needs of our society and our economy. So there is a commitment towards that end. We also seek to be informed by those with expertise and an interest in the sector. So that's why we've created a steering group to better inform our approach through the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan. And it met for the first time, coincidentally, it met for the first time yesterday. It's been chaired by Professor Dave Ray, Professor of Carbon Management and Education at the University of Edinburgh, and they're undertaking some activity, and that will inform what we do in relation to the creation of the Jobs Workforce Academy, the Green Jobs and Skills Hub, and all the other commitments we've made through our Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan and indeed our skills system more widely.
Thanks, Minister. Just obviously you've mentioned the Skills Academy. What sort of output in terms of numbers of people being trained, and what sort of budget is that Skills Academy going to be requiring?
I think in terms of the number of jobs, that goes back to the issue of the hub that we are trying to create, so that we can actually have a better understanding of what the scale of requirements might be. So that they will have an important role in that regard. In terms of the type of budget for the academy, clearly we all need to resource it. I would caution against, we're not talking about a bricks and mortar. This is the academy that everyone will be sent to, akin to a college or a university. Really what that's about is trying to make sure that there is that wider approach across the system we have, more generally, to make sure that every element of it is better geared towards the output that is ensuring that we have people with the appropriate skill set to make sure that they can take advantage of the opportunities that those jobs that are created will provide. So clearly there are resource implications. Can I sit here and tell you precisely what they will be? Well, again, a lot of that will be informed by the work of the steering group and the hub that will emerge. So I probably can't give you specific details just now, Mr. Golden, but that will emerge as we work our way through taking forward the action plan.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Colin Beattie.
Thank you, Convener. Minister, the Scottish Government's working on a framework for the measurement and assessment of the Young Person's Guarantee. And of course, outcomes are everything in this regard. Can you provide an update on this work, including when you might expect this to be in place?
Still very tentatively moving and shuffling my papers here, I hope I'm doing better in that regard. But yes, I can provide some information. I suppose this does take me back, because I completely agree with the point that you're making, Mr. Beattie. We need to have an appropriate measurement framework so that we can actually understand what difference the guarantee is making for young people in the length and breadth of Scotland. Where we are just now is that we're trying to work through how that might look. It does go back to the point that I made in response to, I can't remember if it was, I think it might have been one of Mr. Coffey's questions, that the guarantee isn't effectively a standalone programme. It's about trying to marshal the sum of all the different parts of the system that we have already, albeit we have leveraged in some additional resource to try and take forward the guarantee. So what that speaks to is trying to look at a range of different sources of information to appropriately measure the impact of the young person's guarantee. So right now we're going through the process of engaging with all the relevant partners that would be involved, and you can imagine that's organisations like Skills Development Scotland, Colleges Scotland, Universities Scotland, our local authorities, everyone that has a role to play in that regard, working with them to try and develop that measurement and evaluation framework so that we can properly understand the impact that is being made. We don't tend to take long in developing that, I should say, and we hope to be able to provide more detail and actually report some of that information in around about May. So we're not resting on our laurels, we are getting underway. What I should say though is we are already in the process of trying to provide more statistical information about what is happening in terms of the labour market for young people. I mean, there obviously is some information already. Skills Development Scotland publish its annual participation measure. They do that on a yearly basis. But we, from January, we've begun publishing the Young Persons Labour Market dashboard. Skills Development Scotland is also publishing a monthly snapshot of participation by 16 and 17-year-olds. And we're also continuing that work that I've already mentioned to try and get the hard, fast statistical information that we can provide in terms of monitoring the impact of the programme. I would make one other observation though. It is of course important to be able to report on the facts and figures, the quantitative data that we can provide. We're also very committed to undertaking detailed assessment and engagement with participants themselves. Those young people will benefit by the guarantee so that they can continue to inform our approach. I think that is just as important as us being able to publish the raw statistical information, because we also need to know what the lived experience of those young people going through the system actually has been. So we are engaging some thinking around how we might better undertake that type of activity. We've done similar in the past in terms of the Learner Journey Review. We engage young people in terms of the Developing Young Workforce activity, and we do that with a range of different partners, and we will continue to do that as we move forward.
Thank you, Minister. Clearly there's a bit more work to be done on that. Now, the committee's had evidence previously that the current DYW model isn't suitable for certain types of businesses. Has the Scottish Government received any similar evidence of this?
I've moved my microphone, incidentally. I've got this is the benefit of doing this remotely. I can see the chat function and broadcasting are saying it might be my microphone rubbing against my jacket, so hopefully it will be better going forward.
Would you like me to repeat that?
No, sorry, it was my microphone. I could hear you perfectly well, Mr. Beattie. It was just a status update for the committee. Yes, I mean, I have heard some of that, so I can't deny that, that employers may report that they would like to be able to better engage with developing the young workforce, and sometimes they feel there's an impediment. My own perspective is that the fundamental design and approach through developing the young workforce is such that any employer should be able to engage with it. The design itself, the way it's been pulled together, shouldn't in of itself act as an impediment. It might be about its reach and its ability to be able to maximise the number of employers that any regional group, remember we have 21 regional groups, so that the developing young workforce is rooted more locally. And like any organisation, it could be about capacity to try and engage with more employers. So one of the things we've done, and again, this is part of our approach to, in part, a response to COVID 19, but candidly, it was already something we were engaging and thinking about. Is we've created a network of schools coordinators for developing young workforce, so that they can better support both the senior management within our schools system, who are very busy people, as you will know as well as I, better support them, and also better support that network of 21 regional groups to be able to better embed the Developing Young Workforce programme in our school environment. And that will involve engaging with employers. I mean, I must say, and I've got a range of examples here, the regional groups are all employer-led, so they are informed by that practical experience of being employers themselves. And by and large, I think they're doing a great job, and there is activity underway across the regional groups, definite activity, being responsive to their local circumstances to try and better reach out to the employer base that they have in their community. And if the committee was interested, I'd be happy to write with a range of specific examples that are happening in specific regions. I could go through them just now, convener, but it'd take a while.
Perhaps you could send us those in writing, and that would avoid the difficulty with the microphone as well.
Well, I can see that C Broadcasting are saying I'm sounding better, so hopefully.
Indeed they are. I'm not suggesting they're incorrect. Mr. Beattie, is that you completed your questions for the Minister?
Yes, back to you, convener.
Thank you. And now Graham Simpson.
Well, thanks very much, convener, and I'm glad the Minister's got his microphone sorted out. That's a huge relief. So sticking on the same subject, Minister, you mentioned these coordinators, and of course there was a pilot in Glasgow and Fife. Is that Developing Young Workforce scheme is it being rolled out across the country?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you're glad you can hear me better, Mr. Simpson. It's good to know you always like to hear what I've got to say. I knew that was the case anyway. Yes, we are rolling that out across the country, and it was informed by the experience that we saw in Fife and Glasgow. There was great enthusiasm from the regional groups that had taken forward those as pilot projects. We clearly supported them to do so, and there was some good learning, and that informed the approach that we seek to take forward now, exactly on the basis that I've laid out about better embedding the DYW approach in the school environment. Yes, that will have national reach. We have over 200 schools coordinators recruited across 18 of the 21 regional groups, so there's still a bit to go, but we're almost there. In terms of recruitment, we provided £6.25 million last year to begin that process of recruitment, and we're increasing that investment to £8.2 million for this financial year, and the ambition, which we will achieve, is that those school coordinators will be able to interact with every single secondary school in Scotland. So yes, the commitment is there, and I believe we'll achieve it.
So in terms of that rollout, what you're saying is you've started, but you're at an early stage. I mean, can you just give us a sort of idea of where you're actually at with that?
Well, as I say, hopefully the fact that we've recruited 200 coordinators in 18 of the 21 groups is a good indication. We're pretty far down the line. The ambition is that by May of this year, we have a DYW school coordinator for every single secondary school. That will give some lead-in time, of course, before the next academic year for those school coordinators to find their feet, to work with the regional group and the school environment that will be working in, to think forward about how they will have that process of engagement with employers to better embed DYW. So we're pretty far down the line. Hopefully that's a good indication.
Okay, I guess that's something for the successor committee to keep an eye on. Can I just go back to the young person's guarantee? What's it a guarantee of?
It is a guarantee that over the next 2 years, every young person will be supported into some form of employment, education, training or purposeful volunteering experience.
That's over the next 2 years, and obviously sort of during the pandemic, and I think Willie Coffey has touched on this today and previously, we've got almost an army of graduates who are out there who've had very few opportunities. My guess is you don't actually know how many there are who are doing nothing. I suspect that's the case. You may have indicative figures, but I suspect there'll be graduates out there who aren't on your radar, as it were. So how are you actually going to reach what you describe as every young person?
So I mean, it would be ludicrous for us to say that we have contact and sight on every single young person in Scotland. I don't think anyone would reasonably expect that we could have that. What we can do, and what we do have, is a mechanism in place to attempt to do that, though. And by and large, we have a sense of where the overwhelming majority of young people are. And a lot of that's led through Skills Development Scotland and the analysis that they undertake. Some of this, and I think it goes back to the point you've made the point that we made earlier around underemployment, because that gets the heart of what you're talking about, Mr. Simpson, in terms of graduates who may not be in employment or more widely may not be employed in a sphere or a sector that they've trained for. And I said earlier, there is work underway to try and better understand precisely where those graduates are in terms of numbers, so that we can make sure our system is better geared towards that end. So just as a reminder, in terms of universities, we are working with the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services, and in terms of colleges, working with SDS and Young Scot to try and make sure that we can have a better measurement in terms of that challenge of underemployment for those with a skill set that they've acquired through university or college.
Well, I've got what I hope is a helpful suggestion for you. I really am trying to be helpful here. I think you've got youngsters who've left university or college last year and who will do the same again this year. And the universities and colleges are not following up with those youngsters. So you've no idea what's happened to them. So I think, particularly during the pandemic, that it would be useful if universities and colleges contacted all their graduates and just find out what they're up to, where they are in life.
So
because if we don't do that, we don't know what the picture is.
Yeah. So first of all, I accept that's an entirely constructive suggestion. I think that activity does take place to a larger extent. Well, it goes back to the point I made in terms of how, for example, Skills Development Scotland try and track progression and where young people are. There is an element of that in place, and be happy to get some information about the methodology that they employ and the process that they deploy to try and take that forward. There is inevitably a cohort, and it isn't a significant one, but there are a number who will not engage in response to the attempt to engage with them, and that's where it can be somewhat difficult to have a line of sight as to where they have ended up. So, no, I hear you saying it doesn't happen. There is activity. How much of a reach that has, how much that could be improved, is a question that is entirely legitimate to put to us as a government, to our academic institutions. And I guess that goes back to the work that we're already undertaking in terms of trying to have that better measurement of underemployment amongst those who have left our tertiary education system, because we can only measure that if we know where they are. So, I would recognise and concede the system can be improved, but I think it would be unfair to say that there isn't an attempt made just now.
Okay, I'll leave that one with you, Minister, and if we're both re-elected in May, perhaps we can work together on improving this system. But I'll leave it there, Convener.
Thank you. And Alex Rowley.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. If I can maybe just pick up on a couple of points there before I move on to talk about Fair Work. You did say, Minister, that people, you talked about people not being able to find employment in the area of skill set that they have developed through their college place or university. And I ask, what kind of data is based to produce an evidence-led approach to investment in skills and training? So are you able to, for example, look at the Climate Skills Action Plan? Are you able to look at the projections in terms of the construction industry? If we take the construction industry as being one, we talk about building back better, so tackling fuel poverty, retrofitting houses. What kind of data set are you looking at to plan for the future to ensure that we're matching up the opportunities to the young people, that the skills that they're going to get are going to give them a long-term sustainable career?
So there is available information just now. Some of the work that Skills Development Scotland some of the work that Skills Development Scotland undertake through their skills investment plan is very much predicated on having that full assessment and that understanding of what the requirements in any particular sector might be. That is, of course, informed by engagement with employers. If we're not speaking to employers about what their requirements are, then we're not going to properly understand what the required output through our skills system should be. What I will say, and what we'll entirely accept, is that needs to be improved, and we need to do more to continually finesse the system of having a better understanding of what those skills requirements might be, and with specific relevance to the Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan that you've mentioned, Mr. Rowley. It takes me back to the point I made in response to another question about the hub that we are seeking to create, the Green Jobs Hub, which is designed for that specific purpose, so that we can properly engage with employers, so that we can understand precisely what types of jobs are available now, what ones are going to be created, and what type of skill set we need to embed in our population to make sure that they can take advantage of those opportunities. So that's, we recognise the challenge, and we're trying to go about meeting that challenge. To an extent, we do that through the current approach through SDS in terms of the skills investment plans that they produce. But yeah, we need to continually improve that, and that's what we're committed to doing.
Because I'm sure you would be the first to acknowledge that we do have major skills gaps within the Scottish economy. And it's really therefore, it doesn't seem rocket science that you would want to look at where those major skills gaps are. So construction is one area where there is major skills gaps. ICT, particularly graduates coming through, is another area where there is major skills gaps. Now, they've been there for many years, but they seem to be growing. So if we are planning to build back properly, it would be good if you were able to, if there is any such strategies out there, but maybe perhaps come back to the committee to set out how we are trying to look at those skills gaps across the economy, where they are, where the plans are for the future of the economy, and how are we actually bringing that together Because otherwise, is the danger not that, and I applaud the work that's going on in terms of getting the coordinators into schools. I think that's spot on, giving the 1,800 people new opportunities, spot on. But the danger is that we're not actually gearing up either the people or working with industry and with skills providers to actually give people a sustainable future and tackle the big issues in our economy.
Well, you fundamentally identify the challenge that we have, Mr. Rowley. You are right to observe we have skills gaps in certain sectors. They fundamentally take two forms, one of which is, I'm not suggesting easy to tackle, but it is easier to tackle in terms of reorienting and gearing up our skills system to make sure that we are training people in the relevant areas. The other fundamental challenge, which is not as easy to surmount, is lack of people. Where we've had a high employment economy, and in some parts of Scotland, effectively zero unemployment, but still vacancies, still employers looking for people to work. It's because there isn't enough available people. So there is some work underway in that regard through the Population Task Force, and Fiona Hislop reported some of that information, some of the work that's been taken forward earlier this week, or maybe towards the end of last week. It was recently. But more widely, the challenge you speak of is fundamentally one I've already spoken about, is trying to make sure that our skill system is geared towards the wider requirements we have in our economy and in our society. Part of that also, developing young workforce is a real responsibility here. Part of that is about making sure that in determining the choices that they make around the further higher education they enter or the form of employment they enter, that young people are making informed choices, that they are aware of where the opportunities are in the economy and where they're going to be in the future, and the type of thing they should be thinking about making sure in terms of getting ready for that. But yeah, there's a range of activity that we need to undertake in terms of better understanding where those gaps are, understanding how we go about bridging them and filling them. And there's work underway. I've spoken about the skills investment plans. You mentioned the digital skills requirements. Of course, there's been a variety of work reported. The Logan review that Kate Forbes commissioned reported has made recommendations, and we're responding to them as well. But you've asked for more information, and I'll be happy to provide as much detail as I can in writing to the committee, Mr. Rowley.
Okay, thank you. And can I move on to the issue of fair work? And obviously I would acknowledge, as the Scottish Government does, set out that the employment law is reserved to Westminster. But that said, could I ask, how therefore does the Scottish Government encourage employers in Scotland to embrace fair work practices, and what steps or what powers are available to the Scottish Government to take when they become aware that an employer is not engaging in the fair work practices?
Well, you're right, of course, to observe that employment law is reserved. Is my perspective, I'm sure it's not a surprise to the committee that it shouldn't be. It's also Scottish Trade Union Congress perspective that it shouldn't be. And indeed, I was very delighted to see that it's the Scottish Parliament's perspective it shouldn't be. I know not unanimously, but in a debate on the 3rd of March, Parliament overwhelmingly voted for an amendment I presented that said the employment powers should be vested in this Parliament. That would allow us to take a fundamentally different approach in terms of employment law that we see just now. But that said, that doesn't stop us trying to do what we can within the context of the responsibilities and powers we have just now. You were right to posit the question in terms of encouragement, Mr. Rowley, because by and large that's the sphere we are in. It's about trying to work with employers to espouse the benefits of fair work. Self-evidently, there are benefits for the worker through fair work, but there are significant benefits for employers as well, in terms of those employers that fully engage with the fair work agenda, in terms of remuneration, providing effective voice for employees, providing for better involvement in the workplace for employees, providing flexible working arrangements for employees so they can be able to take account of their wider life circumstances whilst being able to maintain employment, lead to really good outcomes for employers as well as for the employee in terms of reduced absenteeism, increased levels of retention, higher levels of productivity, all things that employers would say are really important to them. So there's a great story to tell in terms of fair work for the employer as much as there is for employees. So we engage on that basis. We speak to employers directly through the range of mechanisms we have. One of which, for example, through the current COVID-19 period, has been through the prism of the Fair Work Statement on COVID-19 that we issued jointly with the SDUC, COSLA, the SCVO, the SEDI and IOD Scotland. I think were all the signatories, encouraging employers to make sure that they are adopting fair work practice in the current context of COVID-19. I think that's particularly important. But we think it's important, irrespective of the fact that we presently find ourselves in a pandemic. Fair work is important at any time. So, largely it is the process of engagement and encouragement. There are other steps, of course, we can take. Again, I suppose this is in the encouragement sphere, but we fund a Poverty Alliance to undertake the function of Living Wage Scotland, to take forward their accreditation scheme to make sure that we are seeing more employers as accredited living wage employers, to make sure that we're seeing an uplift in the number of people in Scotland who are in employment being paid at least the real living wage, and we've been very successful in that regard. We have a disproportionately high number of those employers who are accredited across the UK being based here in Scotland. We also see that the working population in Scotland has the highest percentage of people paid at least the real living wage of the four nations of the UK. But beyond that, we're also deploying our Fair Work First programme, which sees employers having to commit to the fair work principles in response to being in receipt of certain elements of public funding. Now, we've started with regional selective assistance, which is of course delivered through Scottish Enterprise. We've seen, I think, something in the region of £2.4 billion worth of public investment being subject to the terms of Fair Work First. We want to increase that. We want to grow that. We're thinking through how we can continue to apply Fair Work First as a mechanism to ensure that fair work is being spread out more across the labour market. And the good news is that what we're hearing is that it's not acting as a disincentive to employers coming forward to seek that assistance. When they're told that this is what you're required to do to be in receipt of the public purse through regional selective assistance, Scottish Enterprise are saying, well, either the employers already meet that standard, or if it's required some adjustment from employers, they've embraced that and they've done it. So again, that's making a difference.
Okay, thank you. I would just say that I think, in the next Parliament, we should hopefully make much more progress in terms of procurement, because that is the other area where we have immense power, although you and I would agree absolutely on employment law being devolved. The case for that is clear. And finally, Convener, ask specifically around the Workplace Equality Fund. Just a couple of points. Firstly, the fund was only open for 1 month. What was the uptake like, and should it have been open for longer, or will you look at that? And secondly, in terms of the fund itself, how will you be measuring the outcomes? So really, could you give us a sort of general update there, picking up the point about it only being a month open, and how will you measure what achieves the outcomes? Thank you.
Well, as with much of the activity that we've undertaken over the course of the year, right across government, it will not be a surprise to you, Mr Rowley, that we experienced significant disruption as a consequence of COVID-19. So the plan certainly was not to have the Workplace Equality Fund opening as late as it did, and certainly in an ordinary year it would have been open for longer. So it's not a new fund, it's been in place before. So in 2019-20 it was open, in 2018-19 it was open, and it opened earlier, and it was very successful. What I can say is we are still funding 12 projects through that fund. It shouldn't be looked in isolation. Convener, we have the Women Returners programme that we're starting to take forward. That's funding 12 projects as well, so that's 24 in total. By comparison to 2019-20, when through the Workplace Equality Fund we delivered 25 projects. So in that regard, I think we've done remarkably well in a short time scale. But I entirely take the point that, ideally it would have been open earlier, and ideally it would have been open longer for application. The positive news is that we are committed to continue to take forward this fund. It is an important mechanism to try and ensure that we are working with employers so that they can learn best practice in conjunction with the partners that they identify when they come forward to make an application to the fund, so that we can see those who are underrepresented in the labour market getting the opportunities that they require, that they deserve, and then learning from those schemes to be able to deploy them and apply them more widely. So we're still committed to taking that forward. It's an important area of activity for us as part of the overall Fair Work agenda. And yes, of course, we will assess the efficacy of the approach in each programme that we undertake. We've done that year on year, and I'll be very happy to provide some details about those projects that we funded in the past, and also some information about how we intend to do that for those that are currently being funded. I'll be happy to follow up in some writing with that detail, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Thank you, Convener.
All right, thank you, Minister. We look forward to your written detail. And with that, I will thank the Minister and his officials for attending virtually today, and suspend the meeting, and we'll move into private session at 11 o'clock. Okay, thank you.